starting my speech. Three, two, one. If we want to regulate the prices and if we want stability in a failing economy, we want to regulate the spending, but at the same time, all the sectors in a society. I have 3 points to set up here. All are equally important. One, what does the minimum spending limit policy looks like? It comes threefold. One, we tell you that the average spending unit will be capped by how much is sufficiently needed, for example, by necessities that are food and shelter, to primary and secondary needs by a certain percentage. This means that there is a specific department for monitoring these types of surveillances by hiring economists from the government in order to assume that the policy is exactly feasible in our end, right? But secondly, we tell you that the minimum spending policy isn't a standard amount of price, but a specific average percentage that is capped towards three levels. One, on the people on an individual level, but secondly, companies existing within that certain country, and three, in multinational corporations. This looks like them, for example, capping on a 40% from their total revenue by A, investing and buying products, especially in multinational corporations, B, in infrastructure and health sectors, for example, education, but especially in C, in research and developments. Thirdly, this means we actually force these companies or sanction these companies who overspend or even underspend, especially in a minimum amount, because this comes threefold. A, we force them to lower the prices, especially in basic necessities like food, for example, commodities. This means that we actually make these more accessible towards the people in fiats, for example, like A, government and primary needs, but second, in specific commodities that are easy to purchase, for example, potato corner. But B, this means we prevent or we sanction lowballing these wages and employees, and this means that these labor laws also apply in this type of policy, where we actually focus on limiting these companies who underspend in a certain specific country. C, this means we focus on preventing monopolies in specific countries that has in economic crisis, for example, in healthcare to make it more accessible. Why is this specific model especially important in this round? Because the context on an economic crisis comes threefold. One, monopolies in economically crisis states have lower necessities for a higher price, likely because A, these companies market to people and centralize these types of profits because these people actually need them from these specific companies that are huge, right? Second, the priority of a country in a specific economic crisis comes threefold too. A, they ensure equality spending for prices that fluctuate easily. But B, this means they want stability, especially in crisis, where they want to equalize the supply and demand that happens. But thirdly, especially, and multinational corporations in countries with economic crisis, they want to prevent monopolies from happening. What's heightened in the economic crisis is A, big businesses underspend usually in order to hold their revenue, given that they usually are the only ones to provide these basic necessities to the people, right? But secondly, under the guise of low cost and high return, these multinational corporations likely don't invest back into these sectors because they outsource from outside countries and imports, for example, and don't return that type of source and revenue towards these sectors that need them the most. For example, Nestle, who does buy products from Malaysia, but don't improve the sectors like labor laws or labor sectors in a specific country that people depend them on, right? That's how they actually centralize the monopoly, especially in a failing economy. So, what is the exact argument that we have here? One, we need to cap the spending limit because it provides the exact stability and forces MNCs to cycle in the profit in a specific economically crisis state. It seems threefold. One, on an individual level, people are likelier to spend in terms of failing economies, right? This is true for three reasons. One, they want to spend because these prices equally fluctuate, right? There's a heightened demand for spending, and the spending power also is heightened in an economically crisis state. For example, they'd likely want to focus on food production systems as well when they want to start businesses. But at the same time, they'd also want to invest in stable assets like gold in terms of because these prices or the economic state of an individual is also fluctuating as well, right? This means that these sectors also have to market their products even more in an individual level, and this means that some products become cheaper because of the fluctuation. Second, this is important because this means that A, they evaluate which prices and products suit their exact budget, and this is already heightened and stabilized if we do cap that spending limit on a certain individual, right? Comparative to opposition, only with the cap limit do people have more nuanced choices, especially with their type of or their incentive of where they spend their money on, because because compared to their side, they'd likely have unregulated spending that fuels the businesses that underspend because they don't have statistics from the government. For example, economists that don't have exact data and researchers that eventually become unreliable, right? Secondly, in companies, in proportion of percentage, it's important because we trade off businesses likely to expand, right? Opposition might say that these businesses cannot expand, but we tell you that one, it's not a priority on an economically crisis state because it doesn't diversify the income. Likely because it makes it harder for people to spend on a certain state, right? Secondly, if we do cap the spending limit, especially to certain percentage in a company, businesses can now ensure that each sale brings a minimum amount of revenue. And this is important because on impact, this means they'd likely have to produce quality products and invest on their own assets like their employees as well, right? Which in turn, three, forces businesses that are already existing to spend by sourcing out from their local industries and sectors. For example, the agricultural and cocoa farmers, for example, in order for them not to have higher levels of loss, right? Thirdly, it's important because on people then we trade off their individual leisure for actually purchasing these products that make them want to the most, right? Because it's important for three reasons. One, they do want to start working harder as opposed to them actually suffering debts in return, right? In the long run, if they do actually purchase for quality products, if they cap their minimum spending, this means they'd likely have to evaluate the choices that they have. See, in terms of upper, middle, and lower class people in our sectors in society, second, we limit the spending, especially in those upper classes, so as for them not to exactly hoard their entire wealth, especially in a fluctuating economy that we have right now, right? Thirdly, it's important because us actually implementing this type of policy prevents these exact public panic from actually happening because this means that prices are well regulated and that these businesses are well regulated as well. Thirdly, it's important because it mitigates these MNCs or multinational corporations from exactly dominating the country that we have by them concentrating these income by underspending and outsourcing from actual products, right? This means by impact, one, we force these multinational corporations to invest on our own local sectors. But secondly, because people are limited in their spending, they're well incentivized to choose which quality products. In turn, thirdly, it incentivizes these companies by impact to give good quality products, not only because of the competition, but also because it offsets the fixed loss or cost more effectively by them returning that through utility and actually investing in their employees as well. Fourthly, the fourth impact that we have here is that it also disincentivizes the exact monopoly that we have in current society because now governments can get concentrated data and equalizes them because people aren't spending on as many things as before, right? This means companies are actually now forced to become more transparent on a higher level, and especially in an urgent state such as a failing economy, it's even more important because this means that economists can now focus on which sectors to prioritize on, and that's how we also achieve that stability not only on an individual level but on a higher state level and achieve that in a failing economy. For those reasons, I'm proud to.
Starting my speech in three, two, one. Opposition prep for the different definition of a minimum spend policy in 15 minutes because we didn't check the motion's clarification. The motion clarification states that the minimum spend policy is about government expenditure, right? It's not about mandating businesses to spend a minimum amount. It's about setting a minimum policy on actually like creating government expenditure on necessary sectors, right? So it's about education, it's about health. So I think that government chose the wrong model because this is not what the debate is about. But even then, I'm going to respond to this, right? Because I think that the debate takes place in an economic crisis, not just a normal like crisis, right? This means that the problem in a crisis is mostly about monopolies. It's about like a bubble bursting. It's about the stock market falling down. It's not about big markets trying to monopolize these and trying to underspend. This is just untrue. But even if this is true, like, right? Notice how monopolies will still exist on either side of the house, but the number of businesses will still be lesser on an economic crisis because businesses in an economic crisis are already falling apart. Like, for example, in the Great Depression or the dot com bubble, a lot of companies, big companies, are already falling apart, which means that what they're trying to solve on government on scale is just a little amount because the number of businesses are already going down on either side of the house. Because the problem is not companies underspending, it's about the government trying to solve an economic crisis and whether you should do a minimum spend policy to solve this in the first place. Because what is an economic crisis? I posit that it's probably because of an economic crisis that affects like the whole like economy, right? Like for example, look at the past economic crisis. It's a dot-com bubble. It's the 2008 like housing crisis. These are the economic crisis that we should be talking about, and these were not caused by monopolies. Like this is just a vibe check, right? But this also looks like increasing unemployment because there are less businesses, but the economy is also volatile right now because there are a lot of businesses that are falling apart, right? Which means that the market right now is simply unpredictable and the economy is unpredictable, and we need to reallocate our resources to actually spending into the necessary things that we need to solve this. Meaning, the counter model from UP is simple. You have to not put a minimum spend policy on government expenditures, meaning that you are more flexible on side opposition because you focus your resources instead on solving the crisis by being flexible with your budget, which means that you don't set a minimum budget for education and health, but instead you just don't have a minimum budget at all, and you just try to create and you try to invest in things that actually matter, like trying to solve the crisis. Which means that the minimum spend policy that government should be defending, because this is their burden, is that you have a small budget and you have to allocate it to other sectors, meaning that you just get less like funds on their side of the house to actually allocate to the sectors that actually like cause the economic crisis in the first place. Argument one: you solve the economic crisis faster on side opposition. Because note that the main reason right now is probably in one sector or one aspect of the country. Like for example, the housing crisis in the US is the sole reason why this economic crisis happened. Which means that we need to create like things to spend on that specific problem, on that specific sector. Because it's not about the different sectors within an economy, it's specifically on one side of the sector. But also, the second is you're incredibly vulnerable right now, which means that there are lots of different sectors that are also suffering right now. And by the fact that you are in an economic crisis, it means that there are a lot of unpredictable things that can happen within the state that you are in, right? But it's worse if you have a minimum spend policy, because you always have to spend on education and you always have to spend on health instead of trying to be flexible with your budget on solving the unpredictable crisis that does come up with an economic crisis. And we think that in an economic crisis, you have to be as flexible as possible because you don't know how the market is going to go. You don't know where to allocate your government expenditure to actually solve the problem. But this doesn't mean that you spend just zero on education or health. You're probably still going to spend some amount, but we think that you should not put a number to that so that you can be flexible with that. So you can reallocate your resources to the things that are necessary within an economic crisis. The impacts for this is simple. You solve the economic crisis faster in opposition because your funding is flexible and you can allocate most of your resources in solving it like pretty easily. Because if there's a minimum spend policy, then education has to take $100 and health has to take $100 and you can't reallocate from that because it's a minimum spend policy. So you can easily more reallocate that on opposition. But even if they can solve it to some degree, right, on government, even if you don't have minimum spend policy, why is it important to solve it as fast as possible? Because the majority of people are suffering right now because of the crisis. Like you have a lot of unemployment. These people cannot put food on the table, not because of a lack of education or a lack of health. It's because of the economic crisis, right? So we need to solve it as fast as possible to reduce the number of in unemployment, to actually get them jobs, to be able to put food on the table again. But the second is the state wants to solve this as fast as possible, because not that this is a state debate, right? Because you have a lot of trading partners that you have to appease on both sides of the house, and your GDP is also probably lowering right now, meaning that you have like less agency as a state because you are in an economic crisis right now. So you want to solve it as fast as possible, but so that we are willing to trade off that we lose a little spending on education or a little spending on health, and we think that it's okay because you can continue spending after the crisis when this crisis is like more easily solved under opposition. Like we think that it's better. Argument two: flexibility is important in economic crisis because if you have a minimum budget spending, you have to spend like very strictly like a minimum budget on education, on health, and other sectors. Meaning, if there's an unforeseen circumstances, which is likely to happen in an economic crisis, by the way, on government, you can't reallocate funds that easily because now there's a minimum spend policy, and you get burned at the stake by your like taxpayers, for example. So they see that you're not spending the minimum spend policy, so you shouldn't be that flexible. On opposition, you can reallocate easily the funds to emergencies that come up, which means that if a bank right now needs to be saved by the government to be able to solve the economic crisis, then we're willing to reallocate funds from education and health to some degree to this bank, right, to be able to create and solve the economic crisis in the first place. Proud to oppose. Thanks.
So, clarifying two things. One, we mechanized how companies are expected to spend to prove feasibility as well. Because, obviously, governments get this money from the companies, foreign businesses that oftentimes exploit small countries, right? So, or simply like being or widening the scope of the motion by proving where we're going to be getting the money that governments are going to be using to spend. But secondly, the minimum spend policy is not a fixed and the same amount for all sectors where you're expected to spend $500 million on science and $500 million on education. Like they have to be completely the same. It's two things. For companies, it's a percentage that's assessed by economies, like economists, 20% for Nestle, for example, because of the amount of benefit that and the amount of resources they're extracting from certain countries or sectors, or 10% for smaller businesses. It's assessed and a sliding scale. But B, for governments, it also involves like stricter screenings to assess what the minimum budget allocation for that sector is. If they realize that health is something that they need to prioritize, then they spend more money on that. That should be met regardless of the outcome, right? So what this ultimately proves is their like mechanism of how they're more flexible on there and is not exclusive. But I want to point out as well that I have three responses. The first response, it's exactly because of that flexibility that they do not have any form of stability. 2 points of framing. In states with failing economies, there are two things that happen. One, corrupt politicians are doing significant budget cuts that destabilize specific sectors. And these budget cuts are super duper bad because they do not assess what is the minimum number or what is the minimum budget in order for that sector to continue on thriving. For example, Marcos reducing the Philippine Department of Science budget from 49 billion pesos to 29 billion pesos, not assessing the fact there are scholars within Philippine Science High School who rely on the stipends and allowances in order for them to sustain their families, right? Or Trump, for example, cutting off budget from health and education because of the fact that he wants to like spend more on the military. The fact is, you do not have any form of stability on up, and it's precisely because of that flexibility it makes it a lot more problematic. But I'm going to be engaging still on their best case chat. But the second response then is, well, if there is still some form of stability on like upright, why is it still wrong? Because they do not respond to two things from Hannah. The first is there's no incentive on their end for companies, especially foreign countries, to be mandated to funnel back in resources and income that they've made from that failing country, which means that there's no mech at all for them to develop these underfunded sectors, especially because of the fact that they don't standardize how much is the minimum number required in order for them to develop those industries. But B, as well, even if they're able to develop those industries to some extent, there's still not a form of stability on their end, precisely because of the fact that they do not give us the criteria by which how they're going to be assessing that it's likely on their end that the amount the government spends is something that's going to be allowing economies to function. Third response, they do not prove government benevolence on their end, where obviously politicians are a lot more likely to be misallocating budget resources, and it's precisely because of that flexibility that makes them a lot more exploited. My first extension then is on why there's more in the micro, right? Why there's guaranteed stability for crucial or for vulnerable individuals within specific sectors. It comes threefold. One, health. B, education. But three, labor. Three reasons why. The first reason is a minimum government spending does not cause panic among the people because of the fact that they're at least guaranteed that PhilHealth, for example, the health insurance company in the Philippines, is still able to allocate a specific budget for crucial and for urgent medical problems such as women giving birth or those that need cancer or chemotherapy treatment. Comparatively, on their end, absent that flexibility, sure, they're going to be able to sure, they're going to be a lot more flexible with probably increasing the budget of health, right? Like from $5 billion to $10 billion. But the problem with this then is secondly, in terms of education, because of that flexibility of allocation, you're still going to be getting funds somewhere, which means A, it makes it a lot more easier for politicians to misallocate these resources, but B, they do not prove feasibility on their because they do not respond to our mechanism on how you incentivize foreign countries to reallocate and recycle those resources back into that country, right? So comparatively on those two aspects, because these two are interconnected in the way that these budget and resources are allocated, we simply win the debate by a wash. I also read that motion clarification like today 20 minutes ago. I've evolved the case to be a lot more wider, right? The third reason there is simply in terms of labor, right? Why is minimum government spending necessary? Two reasons. One, aside from aside from the fact that you don't make people panic, the first reason is labor is time sensitive. People rely on these income in order for them to be able to sustain themselves, right? And with the fact that you at least have some form of stability that's guaranteed that this amount of money is going to be going into government sectors, which means that A, you're less likely to fire people, governments are less likely to fire people because of the fact that they still have a minimum budget that shouldn't be touched, that shouldn't be taken away from the people, right? So even if, for example, less people get hired, the weighing here is on stability. Sure, even if you get hired slower or it's harder to find a new job on our end comparatively like from new people, right? At least you make sure that people do two things. One, they don't become complacent. They don't realize that if they do get hired in a job, they realize that, for example, they should have another safety net and not continue relying on that job because of the instability of the economy. Two, precisely because of our mech of the fact that you have the minimum budget, which at least increases that form of stability, right? Comparatively, we've engaged on their best case. Where one, there isn't the government still have enough money on their end, but two, as well, why at least companies to some extent are able to still funnel in back resources towards the specific country that they've exploited, like Nestle buying ethanol and milk from Malaysia, from Thailand, for example, without improving the production systems there. Why is it still far worse off? Because one, they do not mechanize why governments have the incentive, for example, to make sure people within specific sectors are far more stable. And secondly, they do not prove why people are unlikely to panic on their end, especially with the fact that there isn't a minimum budget that a lot of politicians can bypass and like misallocate resources based on their personal agenda.
Starting in three, 2, 1. The first thing that I want to do in my speech is just to clarify or give you a clear picture on what does an economic crisis look like, because I think that it's very vague coming from government. I do not know what government is trying to solve here because they just keep on saying milk from Thailand for an example, or the healthcare, which we think coming from opposition that should not be the priority of a state in times of economic crisis. Because an economic crisis, we concede that there is social unrest because there is a reduction of trade with other states. This looks like less stocks on certain produce because there's less imports. How take a look at how probably the Philippines has less imports on rice for an example. This also looks like less state revenue because there's less exports because the state probably is more conservative over the resources. This means that there's less economic output because of the reduction of trade with other states. But this also looks like high unemployment rate in times of economic crisis. And people are scared to spend their money in comparison or in opposition to what Hannah told you earlier, that people are likely to spend because prices are low, are likely to invest on stable assets like gold. We think that is in and of itself is false. It's untrue because even in economic crisis, people are more conservative about their wealth, especially those from the peripheries or in the marginalized sector. That characterization alone is very limited because those people who can spend during economic crisis are those who can secure stable assets or those who only can spend because they have savings in their trust funds, for an example. This is where I'd like to insert what should the states do in times of economic crisis if their constituents do not want to spend because they're afraid to do so. We think that the prioritization of the state should be economic mobility. It should be prioritization on agriculture, for an example, or creating jobs, which, by the way, government cannot co-op because even if they would say that we're not talking about millions and billions, it's about percentage. We think that even though they would say that the percentage was gonna be it's a percentage for companies, 20% for big companies or 10% for small companies, we think that's still of the same vibe. Because if you put it 20% of the national budget goes to different sectors, the health sectors, as they said, or the science sectors. But we think coming from opposition, in times of economic crisis, flexibility is important because you cannot be rigid 20% for health, 20% for agriculture in terms of economic crisis, where the priority of the state should be economic mobility, helping farmers to like farm, for an example, so that they will be more experts of banana, for an example. Because in economic crisis, you reshift budget percentage. The 20% from health sector becomes 10% because it's going to be refunded to agriculture. I don't think that you're likely to do that when you impose a minimum spend of these health sectors, because when you impose a minimum spending, these sectors rather would likely to be incentivized to reach that kind of minimum spending, which probably can't be prioritized in this case as a whole because you have to refunnel at least some of those percentage to something that's more important for the state, like agriculture or even labor, as government would posit. So on scale, even if government would say there's still subsidies for agriculture, there's still subsidies for the labor sector. On scale, there's gonna be more subsidies in opposition's world because you reshift, you restructure the budgets, you're more flexible into what the state needs in comparison to the rigidity or the minimum spending in government. The third thing that I want to do is just to examine and diagnose the model of opposite of government rather, because they told you that it's better if there's a minimum spending on companies because this is in a way restructuring them and incentivizing them to invest on local produce or on local businesses, for an example. We question the feasibility and likelihood because one, are states able to successfully impose a cap on spending for these private companies or multinational companies at that? I don't think that's their priority in terms of economic crisis because firstly, the state's priority is pacifying their constituents, but the second thing is the prioritization on important sectors or sectors that matter in terms of economic crisis. But even if it's true, let's say that the state are able to impose a minimum spending for certain companies, for these private companies to lower their prices and encourage the people to spend, we think that kind of claim is false, and there's a problem on government's analysis on it as a whole, because a cap on multinational or private company spending, meaning you also cap their production. So if you cap their spending on their production, you lessen the amount of produce that are able to provide
Joy.
in the first place. Meaning, if their produce is limited, they're likely to impose higher prices on produce because they provide a limited production. I think that's the basic principle that we ought to like know in the first place, right? So their claim on lowering costs is just an assertion. It's not true in the first place. Before proceeding, Troshan.
We didn't say it's a cap or limit, it's just a minimum amount they have to spend. Secondly, how do you ensure that corrupt politicians won't take away too much budget from vulnerable sectors? You don't prove which sector is more vulnerable.
Yeah, I think that harm still is applicable on your side because if you say it's not cap, it's minimum spending. So these companies are likely to spend more if they say that you have to spend 20% or like a minimum of 20% of the national budget for the sector. Meaning, so they're still likely to be motivated to spend that much, even if those percentage or money can be refunded to something that's more important or to a sector that should be prioritized by the state in the first place, right? This leads me to my extension because the priority of the state as Aaron told you is of course to be flexible, because that's in a way to rebuild the trust to the state, trust of the people to the state amid the crisis. Because in times of economic crisis, people are afraid to spend because they see that state has low economic output. They worsen the fear in government world if the state administration will be seen as rigid, like the budget for all sectors is going to be the same, because that's the rigidity looks like in government's world, right? If that's the case, the state will lose legitimacy in solving the crisis. People will lose trust over the administration, and if people will lose trust, they're less likely to follow the economic policies that the state will impose in times of economic crisis, or they're likely to in or the state is unsuccessful in encouraging the people to even spend that much, because the simple analysis of government's model is to say that there's gonna be a 20% regardless of the percentage. I think that or there's gonna be a minimum spend, which means that even if you tell the health sector, for an example, you have to minimally spend 20% of the national budget. I think the health sector are likely or motivated to spend that much and less for to refunnel back to other sectors, which we think that in times of economic crisis, there are other sectors that should not be prioritized. That's why the flexibility is important, so you're able to refunnel it to other important sectors. Thanks.
Starting my speech in three, two, one. Op wants the debate set in an economic crisis, which we are also setting it in, by the way, without actually arguing realistically under the premise. Like imagine being a broke college student and having 100 pesos to your name, still wanting a 90 pesos sisig, for example, when you can opt for other options like pater, which is only 30 pesos, or ampalaya, which is literally only 15 pesos, and you can get rice for 10 pesos, right? But hey, you're hungry, so why not be flexible? Because you need it anyway. And this is the kind of decision making that usually happens, and they cannot say that it's not true, because the parallel is important in two ways. That one, opposition is under the premise that just because that there is a minimum spending limit, that suddenly everything is going to be expensive, suddenly everything has to be bought as soon as possible so that people who are starving get to eat as soon as possible. But the problem here is, under a realistic frame, not only were we able to preempt that, and if they actually listen to the model rather than just trying to squirrel this by talking about the motion clarification, secondly, at the very least, we were able to actually talk about it on all spectrums of possibilities. So while they're talking about government expenditure, we're talking also about people spending, we're also talking about company spending, and I think on that instance, we just win. Two clarifications before I proceed to the issue, right? Firstly, government was perfectly reasonable with the model, by the way. Unfortunately, op wasn't. Because even if we played by their frame of the debate, which still applies to everything we told you, generally their whole case is literally just limited and hinged on limited production, right? Which is two things. One, already clarified and preempted endlessly by Hannah and Sean, by the way, which again, they just needed to listen to the model. Check your notes. Second, this assumes that people need to buy everything. I don't understand why there's this sudden fear that all of a sudden people aren't going to buy the things that they need. Obviously, it's just a frequency at which they buy that is the incentive that we need to push. And I think that's a worthy trade-off to make, because hey, you don't need to buy like $10 million, 10 million pesos house and lot if you can just opt for something that's a much smaller one, right? You don't have to buy all the products of a certain company if you feel and you feel that you need it, and instead forces you to budget it. I don't think that's a bad thing, even if that it does breed some form of dissatisfaction. But second clarification then is that sure, people are more conservative with their spending, but obviously we live in a capitalist society. So if you don't buy, you obviously die. And I think that's a common understanding people. Though obviously you're still going to feel hungry, you will want to buy. So people still spend. And I'll talk about the dissatisfaction more apparently later in my issue. But second, that fear, by the way, is a byproduct of years of lies and false promises, badgering of marketing from monopolies to make people feel a sense of security because they are hungry and are taking advantage of that exact fear. These are the characterizations we got from Hannah and Sean never responded to. And this is where we win on the first issue, which I'll be talking about now. First issue then, would you actually better fulfill your obligation as a state? Because you're correct, this is a state debate, right? And I think on that instance, we already won just from my first two speakers. But just to seal the deal, first push coming from them, and first and almost only push actually, is to talk about urgency. Other than the clarifications I already talked about, there are very many concessions that we made to them to be incredibly generous in this debate. Sure, we say people are hungry, people are starving, people can be unemployed, and these are things that we conceded to, that there are businesses that do need to expand. But Firstly, up is being overdramatic. Minimum is not a total ban on spending, and it is not something that you can't budget. I think the instance here is that you're just forced to budget on things that are much more realistic to you, and means that you just have to change your shift of incentive when it comes to spending. So I think to that instance, those are the analysis provided to you from Hannah when she talked about how rather than trying to create a low cost like high return business model, most companies will opt into developing and investing more in their own employees, for example, or investing more in like products that are actually more locally sourced. This is not something that we just push out of thin air. It's a very real incentive that happens because of the minimum spending limit. This is and they did not respond to it at all. They responded on a completely different angle that is only convenient to them. But the second thing here is that we want to make it clear that we're obviously not trying to trade off urgency completely, but we're saying that stability is the much more important metric in this debate, especially for a failing economy, because we've already talked to you about the history or how exactly failing economies come to be, right? It's firstly that it's a product of bad investments, of reckless spending, of the ability to think that you have capable decision making without proper surveillance, without proper data, and without properly assessing whether or not these are things that you need or businesses that you need to invest in. And I think that's a kind of analysis that they needed to actually talk about and mitigate, because if not, means that on their end, they just want you to be flexible for no apparent reason and simply because people are hungry. Well, we live in a more realistic world than that. Second, restriction is that kind of restriction, or at least the minimum, like, if they want to frame it that way, we're being generous. It's what makes checks and balance a stronger incentive, especially amongst people with a lower sense of security. And this is where I tackle on their whole, incentive push that people are going to be angry, people are going to be, we already talked about this, right? Because absent a it's a stronger incentive because people with a lower sense of security, absent a comparative on their end, where failing economies are the prime time for monopolies and multinational corporations, even local politicians who spearhead local businesses to exploit on people's lack of security by promising them with things and propaganda and misleading marketing, right? The comparative on our end is simple. Progression is more gradual, but sectors are invested in just enough to allow people to live. Sure, people will complain and feel dissatisfied, but that is still mitigated under government for three reasons. That one, it always happens in the interim of a new policy, considering the analysis that it is of course a byproduct of years of incompetent decision making. It's only natural that people have grown used to these things and don't know another way or sense to live. A new policy will always have negative reactions, and in instance, obviously, it's a failing economy. That negative reaction is going to be of this scale, but we see that's still worth it, right? Because secondly, sure that they complain, but this at least it's good because it increases the democratization of transparency to make sure they know where their taxes are going, to know what the fuck companies are putting in their milk, to demand they get reasons for budget cuts in salaries, for resource allocation in platforms that they are promised. And these are the most inherent individual analysis that none of them ever talked about, right? Or none of them ever responded to. In my 6 minutes, let me tell you that on government, you better fulfill your obligation as a state because the data is more concentrated when people, companies, and even the state spends less. So while still limited, all spectrums are going to be covered and are going to be budgeted as much and as responsibly as possible. Well, they could say, oh, maybe if we're saying that they were incompetent, why is this not true? But obviously, from people having negative reactions, they're forced to take accountability for those reactions. The more negative it is, the more that they have to show for the things that they are promising towards people. This means that companies aren't just going to start laying people off and are actually going to start making sure they invest in the quality of their products. This means that on our end, you have people or these politicians or people who want to become lawmakers, policy makers, who are actually going to ensure that this becomes accredited towards a minimum spending limit so that companies have to abide by it, so that people to some instance feel a larger sense of security in the long term. And to that end, we already win. See you in semis. Thank you.
Anyways, starting my speech in three, two, one, go. Oh, wait. Starting my speech in three, two, one, and go. When you're facing an economic crisis, you have to understand that means that the economy is unstable, and what you have to make sure so that you can meet your interest at or your obligation, the obligation of the state to the people, is to make sure that you are responsive, which is something that's unlikely to happen on their side. When you're required to have a fixed amount, for example, of spending to a lot of sectors, for example, because you ought to have a minimum spending for these sectors, we think that you're only going to harm the people on the ground underside government. The first thing that I want to respond to their side is that basically all of their benefits are contingent on sanctioning these corporations, for example, because they say in their model that's how they're able to lower their prices. But I want you to note that it's unlikely if they're facing economic crisis. Because if they say that the economy is contingent, for example, on these corporations, then I don't think that they want these corporations to automatically like fail, for example, or have lesser revenue, for example, when you want to sanction them just because you want to lower their price, for example, because this means that they're likely to fail. This means then that you're likely to actually harm the people on the ground on their side when you actually like sanction these corporations or not. But secondarily, we think that what it means to have minimum spending is that you're required to spend the minimum amount, for example, which can be for a certain sector, for example, much higher, for example. This has important analysis because it already proves to you how it's difficult to actually remobilize your budget, for example, because you ought to spend that minimum amount on this certain sector. And what's likely to, and I want you to note that when you're facing an economic crisis, I want there you have an unstable economy. This means that anything can happen. It's difficult for you to respond to those kinds of things or to those instability, for example, because you ought to spend like a minimum budget already for a certain sector. But clearly, they say that you're able to also provide better security on their side of the house when you meet their obligation. But I think it's unlikely that you're able to provide better security because primarily you will cause a pandemic of fear because they're going to think, for example, that the government has a fixed budget already and it's difficult to remobilize these things. Because I want you to know that the nuance about budgeting as well is that it's something that is just like that like it's something that has to like be prolonged for I don't know a certain years, for example, probably 6 years or whatnot. So it's going to be difficult. You're going to actually cause this pandemic of fear, for example. So maybe even if you do technically provide those things that like government provided, we think it's the perception among the people that's going to actually cause more panic. Even if you're technically able to do those things, we think that this perception is going to cause them more fear and are unable to provide better security. The first thing that I'm going to talk about then in the first issue is where do you actually provide better stability? On opposition, on government, they say that you could provide better stability on their side when you have minimum spending policy. But I think that never really proved this. The extent of analysis was to merely say that you sanction corporations, which I already responded. But secondarily, we think it's unlikely that you're able to provide stability on their side because A, economic crisis is affected by various reasons. In order for them to meet their benefits, they have to access their benefits, they needed to stabilize these things first before you can stabilize the economy. Because what does an economic crisis look like? We think that what an economic crisis actually looks like is that you probably have political instability or probably have economic instability, for example. This looks like being affected by trade wars, for example, because you're dependent with foreign products, or probably having extensive corruption happening in your country, for example, brought by political dynasties and whatnot. Or probably you have demographic issues, for example, such as health or lower birth rate, for example. Or probably you're affected by environmental reasons which you can't predict or you're unlikely to which are unlikely, for example, to be predicted. There's typhoons or earthquake or whatnot. So we think that these instabilities means that you do not ought to have a minimum spending insofar as there are a lot of possibilities that might happen within your country and because and your country so you don't have to make your budget fixed, for example, that it ought not to be like spent in a minimum manner, for example. And I want you to note the fact that the crisis happened already means that one, this was unpredicted because of volatile economy, but secondly, you have weak economic infrastructures. This is important because it proves to you that anything can happen, and a fixed minimum spending means that your limited resources are fixed and you're able to actually remobilize these things. So you're not really that. So the degree of responsiveness, for example, is something that's minimal on side government. But secondarily, we think when you have a minimum spending, you're required to spend your limited resources in certain sectors to meet the minimum threshold. So we think then that you're unlikely to refunnel these budgets or resources to other things because budgets are like set not just like one time. You're expected to like you're expected to like I don't know spend them in 6 years or a long term. Meaning that it's difficult for you to remobilize this funding, for example. So it's difficult, if not impossible, for you to be able to be able to have better solvency on side government. But secondarily, you have to wait for a long time to restructure this budget, so you have lesser urgency on side government when we already proved to you and when both houses concede that there is instability and there ought to be like urgency, for example, right? Why are you better able why do you get better stability on side opposition? We think that we're able to get better stability because A, we're responsive to we are to economic volatility. So how does this actually happen? With A, you can actually determine, for example, the approximate needed budget on our side because when you create budgets on side opposition, it doesn't automatically mean that this is also not sufficient or this is not created in a way that's also sufficient. The difference is that you don't set it fixed in stone, so meaning it's not going to be like a fixed minimum spending, for example, and whatnot. uh, how do you weigh these like contributions therefore one in terms of likelihood? I think the government needed to prove also that all companies, for example, are likely to follow the conditions that governments are also like, I don't know, probably ask like this, for example, to corporations. But secondarily, we think that in terms of urgency, we think you're able to get that better on our side because government needed to prove what how they can respond to instability, which they never really proved at the end of the day. Because when you have a limited budget, for example, difficult for you to restructure your budget, probably to increase something, for example, because probably because again you have limited resources. So that means that you can't just like like technically speaking, like I don't know, probably like increase a certain budget because probably it's going to be used or a certain minimum spending, for example, required for a certain sector. The conclusion here is you're able to like meet the interest better on our side because you're able to provide the stability in the first place. But second issue then is where are people actually better off? We think on government, they say that
Sure.
you basically people are like not better for people you don't cost panic for example on side government because you have guaranteed budget and whatnot, but I this guaranteed budget also exists on our side because budget on our side is still created in a way that is that is sufficiently needed. So we're able to still co-opt their benefits. But secondly, we think it's unlikely to happen on their side that you don't cost panic because in times where a certain sector needs more budget, for example, you can't refund all these things easily. So that means that you cause again the pandemic of fear and cause like panic, for example, to the people on the ground. Why is it that opposition is clearly better when it comes to like making sure that people are better off? I think that you don't again cause this pandemic of fear because people know it's easy to reallocate budget, for example, on our side because there's no need for you to have a minimum spending. But secondarily, because there's certainty in providing basic necessities, for example, because for example, you don't really necessarily have to like spend minimum of 30, for example, when you probably have to I don't know like lessen it, for example, so that you can reallocate this budget for you to be able to I don't know buy like biojustic or whatnot for your health. So for all these reasons and more, proud to oppose.
In a room full of debaters with non economic degrees, what you should trust most is the motion clarifications channel. Why is this important? Because let's assess their policy, right? They explain that they want to equalize spending and control monopolies to centralize their resources. But notice how this isn't exclusive on minimum spend policy, right? Because you don't need to spend a minimum government expenditure to control these monopolies. So this is just not exclusive to the debate, which means that we can co-opt any of their policy because their policy is not central to what the motion asks for. In burden fulfillment alone, opposition wins because we're simply closer to what the motion is. Let's clarify what is an economic crisis. I think the most easy and recent example for the judges and everyone to understand is the COVID-19 like pandemic, right? Where businesses are failing, there's a low number of jobs, and people aren't spending anymore on non-necessities, on cell phones, on bicycles, which is why these businesses start to fall apart. Like this is pretty simple things in an economic crisis. What is wrong if people don't spend, right? Because I think that we already clearly explained, and it's already clearly evident that there is a low number of people that want to spend because they have lesser money and like everything is just uncertain. If the non-necessities, if everyone stopped buying phones, like all of the companies will continue to go down, right? So the scenario isn't that you have 100 pesos and the sisig is 90 pesos. The scenario on your side is that you don't have a job anymore, so you're stuck with that 100 pesos even longer because you are not flexible with your policy. I think that we're pretty clear on that. We still claim the impact that we are able to create or solve the economic crisis faster on side opposition. What do we say? We explain that you are more flexible so you get to reallocate resources and solve any like unprecedented or unexpected circumstances. The only response that we hear is that we didn't prove how politicians are benevolent, so we don't claim any of our impacts. But notice how this is symmetric, right? If politicians are corrupt on our side of the house, then they're also corrupt on your side. So the cut budget on education on government that will also be stolen by corrupt politicians. I don't understand why this is exclusive on not putting a minimum budget spending on a specific like sector, right? But also how this is fiat. Like it's pretty doable to not put a minimum budget policy and have everyone check and balance that because they never explain how taxpayers won't check and balance you anymore. That will be just gone in an economic crisis because especially when they don't have a job, they will be extremely more critical to a government, which means that the checks and balances that they think that's lacking is going to be much larger in an economic crisis because everyone's looking at the government, not looking at them for how they solve the crisis in the first place. What did government say? They explained that you make people avoid panicking. But let's just weigh what makes people avoid panicking, right? It's either you solve the economic crisis where you start jobs again, you like jobs start to exist again, and people have money to be able to put money like food on the table, Or you have to spend minimally on education, build a little more classrooms, and like that makes people stop panicking anymore. Like I don't understand why this makes people less panic, right? Because on sustainability, government just loses because people rely on ayuda, on government spending, on social welfare when they have no jobs, right? But we already explained and we proved to a sufficient degree that we're able to create more jobs with easier time because you just minimize the timeline. The second thing they explain is that you make states more stable because vulnerable now people get help. But note how you will still have a limited budget on both sides of the house. So the vulnerable people get more vulnerable on your side because they continue not having jobs. Meanwhile, on our side of the house, we're able to solve the economic crisis faster because we're more flexible and we're willing to reallocate resources to the things and the situations and the problems that are necessary to solve. Upwinds.
Go. I want to clarify. Gov widens the motion because the debate isn't just about how much money or how much budget the government is going to be allocating. It's about A, where that government gets that money as well, RMEC of one, why you also incentivize and also make sure that foreign corporations who exploit the materials and who exploit the market of a developing country to reinvest back that money into that developing country as well to further like prove sustainability, right? But the second thing we also prove, right, is that sure, if the main focus of the debate is about how governments should effectively budget this money, there were two important things OP doesn't respond to. The first is it's true, the competence of the politicians and their corrupt tendencies. The difference is on our side, because the money is more fixed or there is a minimum budget that governments have to spend, it's less flexible. And because of that inflexibility to some extent, it makes it harder for politicians who aren't even proper economists or who are likely influenced by the state of their emotions to act on a decision as fast as possible to get a significant portion of that budget and allocate it into a specific project. But the second clarification is there is no guarantee on their end that the project, that the policy, that the politician is going to be implementing to try to solve the economy is going to be effective. You literally see a lot of our examples of how Bongbong Marcos, for example, taking a lot of budget from science and tech, has funneled it into quite inefficient projects that ended up being a waste of money, right? That is the main winning metric in the round, where you make sure you foster better stability. But the second response is sure, even if these projects are going to be competent, right, on ops best case, why is it still far wrong? The first thing is they do not mechanize on their end how they're going to be getting that money compared on our end. We prove why our minimum spending also it applies to companies. So therefore, we get that money, we get an additional source of resources to be able to implement back into specific projects. But secondly, as well, we